Begin today the Gemara on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis, 8 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. So the Gemara here is discussing the halacha. It said in the Mishnah that if you're worshipping Avoda Zara and it's something which is the way the Eibusha created it, like stones or something connected to the ground, then it doesn't become asabana. And the Gemara learned it out before from a pasuk. So the question the Gemara discussed until here is, how about regarding bringing it for gavoya, for a carbon or for hektish? Does the same thing apply? Just like for a hedyet it's mutter, so for gavoya it would also be mutter. And there's a svara to say that when it comes to hektish, to gavoya, there it's different. Over there, anything that's worshipped as Avoda Zara, even if it's mechuber, it's part of it's in the ground, nevertheless it will become asa for gavoya. Okay, so now the Gemara continues on this subject. Boy Rami Bachame. Carbon, or even for hektish, something that will prepare a machshir for the carbon. So Rami Bachame asked, Hamishtachave l'kamas chitim, that if one bowed down to the wheat when it's still attached to the ground, it's standing and it stalks. So now he wants to use these chitim. So mahain, the Bachas Gairis say mahain lemenachos. Could this then be used for the flour that's needed for the carbon mincha? So now here, in this case, it's more than what we said before, using something that was served for Avoda Zara for a carbon. Because here, you got to take this, and then you have to grind it and turn it into flour. So you're changing it. There's a shinui. So now the question is, even if you're going to say that it will become asur legavaya, but should I say, yesh shinui b'nevad? The fact that it's changing, that it's becoming flour, is that a change? And therefore, when it was worshipped before, it's not the same entity anymore, so it could be used. Oy ein shinui b'nevad, or there's no change. Once it was worshipped as Avoda Zara, the issue is it becomes ma'os. It's something disgusting that cannot be used for a carbon, and even after you change it and grind it and make it flour, it's still going to be asur. So he brought a raya. It says in the following braise that kol asur legabe mizbeach, anything that's asur to the mizbeach, any animal that's asur to the mizbeach, something that was served as Avoda Zara, then v'ladiseya mutarim. The baby that's born from this animal will be mutter. B'tani Allah, and on this it said in the braise, Rabbi Eliezer oiser. Rabbi Eliezer says that the baby born from this animal will still be asur. Now, as Rashi explains, at this point the Gemara understands, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about an animal that was already pregnant, and he worshipped it as an Avoda Zara. And then this animal gives birth. This kind of case is similar to the case of the chitim, of the wheat, that you change and turn into flour. Just like you take the wheat, it was served as Avoda Zara, and then you change it into a new entity of flour. Here as well, this animal with the behemoth inside, the ubar, was served as an Avoda Zara, but then it gives birth. Now this animal born is like a new entity. It's independent, a new behemoth. So what's the machlekes between the Tana of the Braisa and Rabbi Eliezer? It seems like they're arguing about this point. If when the behemoth is born and it's changed from the form that it was when it was served, will it be asur to be brought as a carbon? So the Gemara says that's not the pshat. Because v'lavit ma'alo, didn't we learn on this that the explanation is machloikis, that what's the argument between the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer? If the behemoth was sodomized, revia, that's one option. It could be speaking about it, or it could also be speaking about it was served as an Avoda Zara. But the point is that when this happened, when the Aveda happened with this animal, it was not yet pregnant. Okay, so the animal itself that served as an Avoda Zara, or there was revia, it becomes asur. Then it becomes pregnant, then it gives birth. So what's the machlekes over here? So as Rashi explains, the machlekes is whether zeh v'zeh goyrim is asur. Because the baby that's born from this animal, it's born from the mother and the father. The mother is asur, but the father that contributes to the birth of the baby was not asur. So the baby that's born from a father and a mother, and the father is mutter, the mother is asur, what's the halacha of this baby, this entity of the baby in the world? That's what they're arguing about. Aval, but the Gemara concludes now, going back to comparing it to the shaila that Rami Bachama asked, Ibroi ulebesayf nearby, if the case was that it was already pregnant from before, and then there was revia with this animal, or you served it as an Avoda Zara, as the case the Gemara was discussing before. So everybody would agree that this animal is going to be aser. So because even though it changed, before it was a ubar in the mother's womb and now it was born, but that change doesn't give any heter. It's still going to be aser. So if so, according to this, we could say regarding the shayla of Rami Bachome, when you have wheat in the stalks that was served as an Avoda Zara, if we're going to say that this asers it legavoya, even if later it changes and it becomes flour, it's still going to be aser, because in such a case, l'kula alma, it's aser. This is one version of the discussion from this braise comparing to the shayla of Rami Bachome. Another version is, and the Bacher adds in, V'itmar Allah, Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Rabbi Baravua, that Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabbi Baravua differently. When they brought this braise, so he said, what's the pshat in this machlokes between the Tana of the braise and Rabbi Eliezer, whether the baby that's born will be aser or not? So he said, machlokes, the machlokes will be in what case? Kishenerbu ule b'seif ibrei. That first was revia, so the aveda was done with the animal, and then later becomes pregnant. In such a case, there's a machlokes, as mentioned before, whether you say zeh v'zeh goyim is aser or not. But if the case would be that it first was pregnant and then the aveda was done with it and now it gives birth, everybody would agree that it's aser, even though the baby born changes in its nature from the way it was when it was served or when aveda was done with it. So here regarding the wheat that's now turned into flour, it's similar to this animal or this baby that was first in a fetus, or it was in the mother's womb and now it was born. Therefore we could learn from there that it will be aser in such a case. Now according to this version, on this, the Gemara says, Hachi ashta. You can't compare the two cases. The level of the change that there is by wheat that's being ground into flour and by a baby that's born is not the same. Hachi ashta, there's no comparison. Also, the fetus, when it's in the mother's womb, it's an animal, and now it's also an animal. The only difference is, there's just a door, the entrance or the opening to the mother's womb that was blocking it from leaving. So when it's born, it's essentially the same animal. So therefore it's going to be aser. It's not a real shinui. Before it was wheat, and now it's flour. It's a completely new thing. So therefore here, the shayla still remains whether it would be aser or not. Another shayla, the Gemara says, still we were discussing using something that was worshipped as Avoda Zara for a carbon, for menachis. Now the Gemara asks regarding a mitzvah. Rish Lakish asked the shayla, a person bows down to a palm tree, and the Gemara is going to explain, we're talking about Na'ifin, where it will not become asa bahana for anyone. But not the question is though for the mitzvah. Lulavai, the lulav of this palm tree, ma'u le mitzvah. Could it be used for a mitzvah? So the Gemara explains what the case here is. If it's a tree that was planted for Avoda Zara, a shade tree, there's no shayla that you can't use it for a lulav. It's completely asa bahana for anything. When's the shayla? So it could be one or two cases. Either be'ilan shanatai or lebesayf avodai. It was a tree that was planted stam, but then later it was worshipped Avoda Zara. And so that's one option, and this is actually according to the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that in such a case, if when it was planted, it was not planted for Avoda Zara, it's mutter for everyone. So the shayla is maybe for a mitzvah, it's ma'os and it should be aser. And now, the case we just mentioned, when it was later served as Avoda Zara, it also won't be any shayla because afil had yet nami aser. Because for any individual, if it was later worshipped as Avoda Zara, it will be aser. As the Gemara brought this machlokes before. So kiti bayalach, according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, when's the question? Aliba de Rabbanon, or actually the Gemara here says that it's not a shayla according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. The shayla is aliba de Rabbanon. According to the Rabbanon that say that in this case it will be mutter for everyone else to use. Leya mitzvah mai. What's the halacha regarding a mitzvah? Mi ma is klapi gevaya. Oi loy. Do I say that it's mois, and just like for gavaya, we say that it can't be brought for a carbon, as the Gemara said before. that you'll be also for a gavoya, so we should say the same for a mitzvah. I lie, or I don't apply the same thing regarding a mitzvah. That's one version we had in the Shaila of Rish Lakish. Yasser Avdimi Yama, when Avdimi came, he said that Rish Lakish's Shaila was different. Ba'asheira shebitla kamibayale. The Shaila of Rish Lakish was regarding an Asherah tree, Avoda Zara, that it was the Avoda Zara if it was nullified. And we'll see in the Mishnah later, Rashi brings that if there's branches that grow from it, which originally wasn't Avoda Zara, but there's branches that grow from it, you break off those branches, you mevatel Avoda Zara. Now the Shaila is, once you mevatel Avoda Zara from this tree, could it be used for a mitzvah, for lulav? What's the Shaila? Do I say, yesh dichui eitzel mitzvah, is that there's a concept of dichui, meaning once it was already rejected from being used of a mitzvah, while it was Avoda Zara, it did not qualify, so once it did not qualify, even after you mevatel Avoda Zara, it cannot be used anymore. And this is a concept you actually find by Kotchim, that in certain cases, once you have a carbon that was puzzle and it was nitche from being brought on the mizbeach, it can't be used anymore. So do you say similar regarding a mitzvah? By mitzvahs, you don't say such a thing. That now it's bottle, and therefore it's mutter to be used. Says the Gemara Text, you should be able to resolve this shaila of dichui, whether something is, once it's not qualified, it can't be used anymore for a mitzvah, resolve it from this Mishnah here. Miditnan, the Mishnah says, regarding the mitzvah of kisi adam, when you shecht a bird, the blood, you have to cover the blood. Kisahu, if you covered it, and then v'nizgale, it got exposed, patimelachasis. You don't have to cover it again. What's if kisahu haruach? The wind blew and it covered it. So then chayiv lachasis. The person still has to cover it. Now, what does it mean the person has to cover it? It's already covered. That the wind blew and covered this blood, but then it got exposed again, and then he has to do the mitzvah and cover it. But what does that mean? If it did not get exposed again after the wind covered it, he'll be potter from covering it because it's already covered. But the question was asked on this, even if it got exposed again after the wind covered it, why do you have a mitzvah to cover it again? Shouldn't I say that this opportunity of the mitzvah, the blood to cover it, once it was pushed off from the fulfillment of the mitzvah because it already got covered, so that's it. You can't fulfill the mitzvah. Later, if it gets uncovered again, there's no ability to fulfill the mitzvah. So Rav Papa explained the pshat in this Mishnah. Zoi say meres. So from this Mishnah we learn ein dichoy eitzel mitzvahs. That by a mitzvah, even if the mitzvah was pushed off, it was already covered. But if it got uncovered again, you could fulfill the mitzvah and you have to cover it again. So if so, we clearly see here the way Rav Papa teaches this Mishnah that by mitzvahs there's no such a thing as dichoy. So we should say the same thing regarding an Asherah tree. Once you were mevatel Avoda Zara, you could use it for the mitzvah of lulav. So the Gemara explains that this iboya of Rish Lakish, the Rav Papa gufei iboyale. This pshat that Rav Papa says in the Mishnah, this is part of the suffix of Rish Lakish, how to understand what the Tana of the Mishnah is saying. Do I say as follows? Mifshat, pshitale, le Rav Papa. Some take out the word Rav Papa. Is this something that was pashit, that this is clear to Rav Papa, the ein dichoy eitzel mitzvahs? That by a mitzvah, there's no such a thing that once it was not qualified, it cannot qualify again. And this loishna l'kula doesn't make a difference if it's going to be a leniency, and v'loishna l'chumre, or if it's going to be a stringency. In the case by the kisi adam, over there it's going to be a stringency, that you're obligated to do the kisi adam again. Over here, we want to say that it should be a leniency, that you should be able to use the lulav. Right, so he says. So it's true. We say that when our Papa says "Ein dichli etzel mitzvahs," there's no difference. Over here, you could use the lulav, and over there, you're gonna have to do the mitzvah of kisi adam again. Oy dilme, or maybe you could say, what's the pshat in the Tana of the Mishnah there? Sfukim esapkele. He actually has a suffix whether when something is not qualified for a mitzvah, what happens now? Do I say that the mitzvah can't be done again? Or it still could once it qualifies again. And therefore, what do I say? L'chomre amrina. L'chomre, I say that it's not disqualified forever and you're going to be able to do the mitzvah. And therefore, when the wind that covered the blood, it was not qualified for the mitzvah. But now when it gets exposed again, you're going to be machmer and obligate the person to cover it. But maybe maybe there's no dichoy, that it does not get rejected forever. I'm not going to say this l'kula here regarding the lulav, that you could take the lulav from an ashera tree that you will mevatel. Maybe here I'll say that we have to be machmer, that once it was nitche, you can't use it again. That's the shaila. So Teiku, the Gemara says, this remains unresolved. Rav Papa, another shaila Rav Papa asked, Hamishtachev lebehema. One bow down to an animal, which is another example of something that does not become usher for a hedyet, as the Gemara brought before. So now the question though is, Samra, the wool of this animal, ma'al tcheles. Could it be used for tcheles? So the Gemara now explains, tcheles for what? Tcheles the mai, what do you want to use this tcheles for? If this is tcheles being used for the garments of the kayanim, for the big dekona that he needs for the avodah. So now, what would be the shaila here? Shaila is the kohen has to wear these garments in order to be fit to do the avodah. So now the question is going to be, do I say that because he's using these begodim to prepare himself to do the carbon, so just like for the carbon itself, you can't use this, so even for the begodim that the kohen wears, it also can't be used. That's one point in this shaila, but there's actually another point in this shaila as well, because you're taking this tcheles from the raw state that it's in, and you're using it to dye these begodim, so it is a shinui. It's not anymore this thing the way it was originally when it was worshipped as Avoda Zara. That's the shaila that Rav Papa would be asking if this is what the shaila is about, the tcheles for the begodim of the kainim. But the Gemara says, if that's the shaila, hainu boya de Rami Bachama. This is the same exact shaila that Rami Bachama asked that we began with today. Rami Bachama asked the shaila regarding using the wheat, and when you grind it into flour, it is a shinui, and you want to use it for the menachis, is it allowed to be used? So it's the same thing over here. You're taking the tcheles, and there's a shinui, could you use it for the begadim of the kainim? So why are we asking this shaila again? Now if you eat tcheles letzitzis, if Rav Papa's intention was to use this tcheles for tzitzis, so then haina baya de Rish Lakish. This is the exact shaila of Rish Lakish regarding the lulav. Could you use the lulav from the ashera tree for the mitzvah? So over here as well, the question is, could you take this tcheles and now use it for the mitzvah of tzitzis? So why is he asking? Why is Rav Papa asking this shaila again? So the Gemara explains, Anachanami. The question of the tcheles is basically repeating the same shaila. He shouldn't have asked the shaila again. Because really Rav Papa, together with this question about the wool, using it for tcheles, it was other questions that he had that he asked along with this that was the main questions, that were new questions. And so he was also speaking about other things that could be used in the body of the animal, where there's a new aspect to the shaila, as the Gemara will explain. And what is this? So he had the following shailas. First, the shaila was, as we already quoted, tzamra ma'al tcheles. What's with using the wool for the tcheles? Then the next shaila he had was karneha, the horns of the animal. Ma'al l'chatzaitzris. Could it be used for the chatzaitzris that is used for the playing the song by the carbon when it's brought in the Beis HaMikdash? Okay, there's a discussion actually in Rishonim about this, because these karnaim are made from, Taisus here speaks about it, it's made from silver or from metal. Taisus says that it must be talking about a shayfer, not exactly chatzaitzris. Another part of the animal, shekeha, ma'al l'chalilin, to make from the thighs, to make a flute. Is that allowed? This is all talking about an animal that was served as Avoda Zara. B'nei meyeha, to use from the intestines of the animal, ma'al l'peidos, could it be used through the strings for an harp? So that was the additional details that he asked in the shaila. Okay, so now the Gemara explains what's the basis of his shaila regarding these additional musical instruments that the Leviim use when they have to sing when you bring the carbon. According to the opinion that says Ikir Shira Bekeli, the main mitzvah of singing by a carbon, and which is something that's a necessity for the carbon, it has to be with a musical instrument. So then, like Tibayalach, it's not a shaila, the Vade Yasser. It'll definitely be Yasser because this is something which is a must for the carbon, so it's Yasser to be used. The shaila is according to another mandama that says, this is brought in Gemara in Sukkah. Another mandama says the mitzvah of the shira that's ma'akif for the carbon is what they sing with their mouths. Now, besumi kola ba'almuhu. So what's the musical instrument? It's just sweetening. It goes along with the singing with the mouth, and therefore my sinon. It could be brought. It could be used for the carbon because it's not really ma'akev. It's just sweetening the song. Or should I say that nevertheless it should still be aser because of what it adds, and it's adding by a carbon, and therefore it should still be aser. So this is an added point, an added question over here, which is not exactly similar to the case of the palm tree, that you're using the lulav from the palm tree. Over here, I could say that even though the shira bekeli, the musical instrument, is not 100% necessary, but nevertheless, maybe it would still be aser, it's still ma'os for a carbon, that you're using this musical instrument for this. Teiku, this remains unresolved. By Rabbe asked the Shaila, or Rabbe, Hamishtach v'lemayim, person that bows to a spring of water. Meimov, Ma'ol and Nesachim. What's the story with this water? Could it be used for the Nesachim that was poured in the Mizbeach on Sukkot? So the Gemara explains, what exactly is the basis of his question? If you're going to say that the basis of the question here is as follows. When he bows to this water, is he really bowing to the image of himself that he sees in the water? And if that's the case, he's not serving the Avoda Zara b'chlal. Sorry, the water that is, that's the Avoda Zara. So it should be mutter. Or no, he is bowing, he's worshipping the water itself. And therefore it's going to be aser. If that's the basis of the shaila, so then this is not a shaila about a spring of water, which is in the ground, attached to the ground, which is similar to what we discussed before, a mountain, a tree, and so on. So v'tibayale seifel lahadyet. You can have the same shaila if you have a pail of water, and the shaila is not even only for a carbon, but the shaila is b'chlal. You have a pail of water, and if you're serving the actual pail and the water, so then it becomes also for anybody to have a no. But if he's just serving his own image in the water, so then it's mutter. The Gemara explains, La'olam l'maya kasagid. So it's clear, that's not the shaila. We know that the person is bowing and worshipping the water itself. The shaila here is as follows. L'maya de kamei kasagid. Is he worshipping the water that's flowing in this wellspring that's right in front of him? But the kamoi also. But then the water that was there first moves on. It flows on, and now the water you have there is not that water that he worshipped, so it'd be mutter. He's worshipping this whole flow of water that's here, and therefore it includes everything that's here, and you can't make such a distinction. That was the shaila about the water. Now the Gemara asks on this, Umi mitzri. Could a person bow down and worship water that belongs to other people, belongs to the public, and aser it? A pool of water or a wellspring of water that belongs to the public, ain't a sudden. It does not become aser because one individual comes along and worships it, similar to the concept that you can't aser something that doesn't belong to you. So the Gemara answers, the case here is that this is water that's coming out from his property. It's flowing in his property. And here the shaila is he the Avoda Zara for the water that flows in the beginning and the water flows away, or is he worshipping the whole thing? And therefore it still remains aser. But it's water in his property, and therefore it's not the water of a rabbin. Sagt der Mishnah mi shahaya beisai, or the Bach says kaislai samoch la'avedes kechavim. If a person had his house right near the Avoda Zara, meaning that it's basically a house where he shares his wall, and on the other side of the wall is a house of Avoda Zara. And Rashi says we're talking about a house of Avoda Zara, not only a house that's used to place Avoda Zara in it, but the house itself is the Avoda Zara. They worship the house itself, Avoda Zara. And Taisa says this is based on what we'll see in the Gemara, that we're talking about a case where it wasn't even necessarily served as Avoda Zara yet. I believe that's it, or Taisa says it later on the next Mishnah. Yeah. Okay, Al Kapanim, so this is what we're talking about over here. So the house was together with a wall for the other side is Avoda Zara, the Nafal, and this wall fell down. Asal of Naisa. He's not allowed to build it again. Because if he builds the wall again, he's not only building a wall for his own house, he's building the wall for the Avoda Zara as well. So what do you do? Keitzad Yaseh. Kainis b'seich shaloi arba ames. He has to make a distance of 4 ames, and then a baina shaloi and ubaina, and then he builds. So he builds a house over there. But he has to distance 4 ames from the Avoda Zara. Now, shaloi v'shalav edes kechavim, if the space where the wall is sitting on is actually a shared space. All right, so till the first case of the Mishnah was that the wall is his wall and it's on his space. But on the other side of the wall, there's Avoda Zara. But here we're talking about a wall that's actually a thick wall and it's shared space between him and the Avoda Zara. So now how much does he have to distance from the Avoda Zara? Again?
The same wall is between.
Well, yeah, true. Yeah, 1 second. But the Mishnah says there's a difference here. Nidain mechze al mechze. So over here, the half of the wall that's his, that's the amount that he does not have to distance. Only the half of the Avoda Zara he's going to have to distance. Meaning, what did the Mishnah say? He has to distance 4 amas. So what's if the thickness of the wall itself is 2 amas? 1 amma of the Avoda Zara and 1 amma is his amma. That amma, that's his amma, is the space that he counts for how much he has to distance. So now he's only going to have to distance from where the wall was in the beginning another 3 ammas, because the wall itself was already 1 amma that was his. Therefore, it's the halach of this is half and half. Okay, now avonov eitzoi va'afroi, the stones or the wood or the sand or the dust from the Avoda Zara, which was built for Avoda Zara, it was this wall that was, Rashi says that even this wall that we just said, that was a shared wall between him and Avoda Zara, this wall collapsed. So you can't use any of it. Metamen, kesheretz, it's Avoda Zara, it was Meshamash Avoda Zara, or it was itself Avoda Zara, it'll be metamen, the person like a sheretz. And Rashi says, Ein breire, that's even the part of the wall that belonged to the Yid, you can't identify what's what. Shenemar, the pasuk says shakes to shaktzenu, and from this pasuk we learn that misham Avoda Zara or Avoda Zara itself is sheketz, it's mitame. Rabbi Kiva says this, you learn from another pasuk this halacha kenida. We compare it to a nida that's mitame. Shenemar, the pasuk says tizreim k'moy dava, you should spread it around like a nida. Say taimele, tell him to go out. Why is it comparing Avoda Zara to a nida? Man nida mitama b'masa. A nida is mitama, a person that is being carried on it. That's the example Rashi uses here. A person that's sitting on something. There's a tumah of medris by a nida. Even on what you're not sitting directly, even what's further down below becomes tamei. Af avodas kechavim mitama b'masa. So to Avoda Zara has the same kind of tumah like the nida. Okay, so the Gemara now asks, in the first halacha it said in the Mishnah, what do you do when the wall collapses between you and Avoda Zara? You have to distance your wall and build 4 amas away. Like the Gemara, that means that you're going to end up giving the Avoda Zara more space. You have to move into your property. Now it's going to have more space. You're not giving it more space. What you're doing is the avadle beis hakisei. In that open area that you're moving away from, you turn it into a beis area of a beis hakisei, a bathroom. Like the Gemara, but how can you do this? To use it for areas, a bathroom has to be private. And for a beis hakisei, you're not allowed to make it in an open, exposed place like this. You can't build a wall there, so you can't make it private. So how could you use it as a beis hakisei? And says the Gemara, beis hakisei delaila. It's made as a beis hakisei that's going to be used only at nighttime, and at nighttime it's okay. But that's actually not true, because the master said, Ezehu tsanua, who is modest, hanifne balayla b'mokim shenifne bayayim. That one that relieves himself by night, the same place like by day, which means he goes out far in a private place, this has to be the same by night as well. The Gemara adds, even though it was said that it doesn't literally mean that let's say by day the bathroom was made far out, far out from the city, in a place where it's completely private. It doesn't mean by night you have to walk so far out, but it means kederech, that you have to do it in a more tzniyazdike manner, the way you expose yourself. That's what it means. But mio tzniyusa by lemevet, it has to still be tzniyas, even by nighttime. So how over here are we making this area that's totally exposed that is going to be as a place of a bathroom? And says the Gemara, the avadlei litinoikis. It's an area that's made for a little child to use it as a bathroom, and for him, it's allowed. Inami, or the Gemara says another pshat, what do you do with this open area? It's not being used for a bathroom. Rather, the goderlei behizmi vehingi. You can't build a wall there, but you could put this fence there that will be with thorns or bushes or something to separate from the Avoda Zara, even without a wall. You could maybe, according to another opinion, it means you could fill the whole area with these bushes, so they won't be able to use it, and you won't live there either. But not a wall. There are 3 houses of Avoda Zara. Bayis shenivne mitchila la'avodas kechavim, a house that was built for Avoda Zara. Here's where Rashi and Taisus points out that what I said before, that this is a house that was built for Avoda Zara, and the house itself is served as an Avoda Zara. Okay, so that's one kind of house of Avoda Zara. Hareza Aser. So the house is an Avoda Zara even before it was actually worshipped. The house, just the fact that it's built for the Avoda Zara, it's going to be Aser Bahana, and if it belongs to a guy, then the guy can be mevatel it. If it belongs to a Yid, then there's no way that you can be mevatel it. It's Aser Bahana. Another example of a house is that it wasn't built for Avoda Zara, but Saidoi, Vekaidoi, or another gear says Kaidoi, he plasters it or makes pictures on it, engraves in it, la'avodas kechavim, for the sake of Avoda Zara. The Chiddush, and there's something new over here in this house with Avoda Zara. So in order to get rid of the Avoda Zara, what do you have to do? So you have to remove what it is that you added of Avoda Zara to the house, and then that's it. It's going to be mutter again. And so that without even being mevatel the Avoda Zara of the house itself. And we're not talking over here about the house that was already served as Avoda Zara. Once it was served as Avoda Zara, the whole house becomes aser. But because it was just made, it was prepared, it becomes aser. But you can just remove what you added, and then it won't be aser. A third example of a house is hichnes latoicha avodas kechavim, that he just brought the Avoda Zara into the house, vayitzia, and he removed it, took it out of the house. So then, hareza mutter. It's going to be mutter because the person didn't bring it into the house. He didn't have a kavanah to designate the house as a usage for Avoda Zara. He just brought it in temporarily, takes it out. It's going to be mutter. Amarav amishtachav bayis asare. Rav said regarding a house, in the Mishnah it spoke about building a house. Rav says if one bows down to a house as Avoda Zara, it's going to be aser. Now the Gemara says, what could I see from what Rav says? Alma, I can prove from what Rav said that Kasava Rav holds Talosh Olibasayv Chibroi, that if you have something which was detached from the ground, but then he attached it again to the ground like a house, you built it into the ground, Katalish Dami, it's considered to be detached from the house. So as we learned before, anything that's attached to the ground does not become Asa Ba'ana. When it's detached, metaltalin, anything object of Avoda Zara becomes Asa. So now here Rav is saying, you have a house. It's in the ground, it's built in the ground, but it's like detached, and therefore it will become us if you bow down to the house. But the Gemara asks from what it said in our Mishnah. What did it say in our Mishnah? That if a person builds this house for the sake of Avoda Zara, then it becomes aser. So it sounds like in the Mishnah, if you built it for this purpose, then it becomes aser. But if there's a house that's attached to the ground now, and now someone bows to it, it would not be aser. So the Gemara explains that no, that's not the pshat. What our Mishnah is saying is, if it was built, it will become aser, even in a case where you didn't yet bow down to it. That's what the Mishnah is trying to say. That as soon as it's built for this purpose, it'll become aser right away. And on the other hand, the same will also be that if, like Rav said, if you bow to it, even if you didn't build it, it's going to be aser. So the Gemara asks, so if so, hani shloisha. The Mishnah says that there are 3 categories of houses for Avoda Zara. There's a 4th category, the case that Rav spoke about, when someone bows down to the house. Answers the Gemara, that's not a 4th category the Mishnah mentions, because kivin de le'inyan bittul, when it comes to nullifying the Avoda Zara, the main focus of the Mishnah is to tell you the different categories of halachas as it applies to nullifying the Avoda Zara. So whether the house was built lechatchila as Avoda Zara, or if it wasn't, but he bowed down to it, the din of nullifying the Avoda Zara regarding the 2 of them was the same. So therefore, it's not counted as a 4th category. So there are 3 categories of racks regarding Avoda Zara. A rock that was carved out of the mountain, and it was lechatchila carved out with the purpose that's going to be used for a bimos, for a platform, for Avoda Zara. And here Rashi again says that the platform itself is served as an Avoda Zara. Harezu asura, it's going to be aser. You can't be mevatel. A yid can't be mevatel this if it belongs to a yid. That is, a guy could be mevatel it. It's already completely Avoda Zara. However, saida v'kaida l'shem avodas kechavim, if it was just plastered or pictured, it was designed for Avoda Zara. So then, as we said before, noitlam hashasiyad v'kiyad, umateres. You just remove whatever you added to it, picture or plaster, and it'll be mutter. If a person just placed Avoda Zara on this bimos, on this rock that he took from the mountain, the silka, you remove it, areizu materes, it'll be mutter. Basically the same three categories as it said before regarding the house. Amar Avami, now this Mishnah Avami says, when it says here that he plastered or he pictured it, v'hu shesiyed v'kiyed begufa shel even, that it has to be done in such a manner that he made a change in the actual rock itself. He engraved in it, and he put the plaster and the picture engraving inside of it. But not if it was just external. If it was just on top that he put external, then it doesn't answer it in the first place. But the Gemara asks, how could Rabami say this on this Mishnah here? We had the Mishnah before about a house where it was a similar thing. The three categories it says here is similar to what we had in the previous Mishnah regarding a house. Ubayis labikufihu. When a person plasters a house or he makes a picture on a house, that's not something, a change, an engraving inside the house. Umitzar, and it becomes aser. So the Gemara wants to say, no, maybe not. Bayis nami, the previous Mishnah as well, when it said by a house that if he plastered it or he made a picture on it, so ikebeni orvi, he put the plaster or the picture in it, and it's between the bricks. It's not smooth, so what you add goes inside between the bricks. And that's why over there it becomes aser. But the Gemara says that's not what the Mishnah is talking about before necessarily. Mila yaskinon isn't the case in the previous Mishnah, the Shia, that it was already smoothed out. And v'hada shaya, and then he plasters it again for the Avoda Zara, or he makes a picture now on top of it. So it's very smooth. There's nothing going inside. So there, where the Gemara says, "Elo ki itmid Rabami le'inim bittul itma." What Rabami was saying was not regarding when he's making the Avoda Zara, he's adding this plaster or picture. It'll be also either way. But he was speaking about nullifying the Avoda Zara. And what he's saying is that that even if the plaster or the picture was engraved inside the stone itself, nevertheless, kinota mashechidesh, if it removes what he added, shapidami, it's fine. Now the chiddush here is the mao. The time I would think to say kiv should say it v'kid begufa shel even, since he plastered or he added something that went engraved inside the stone itself. Ke'even shechatzav mitchil avedas kechavim damya. So now it's like you change the nature of the stone itself. It's like you remove that stone from the mountain lechatchila for the sake of Avoda Zara v'titza kula. So the whole stone, the whole thing should become totally aser, like the first case of the Mishnah. Kamash Malon. That's what Abami is saying, that even if it was engraved, it's still an added thing. And if you remove it, you're mevatel Avoda Zara this way.